Just double check. Yeah, I'm not doing the spinny thing. The computer's doing the spinny thing. Anna, welcome. It's great to have you here. I'm going to hand over. The screen is yours. The Last Wellness Taboo.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. Right. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to why I believe that alcohol is the last wellness taboo, the vital conversation that very few people are having within the workplace, and to hear my deeply personal insights on the subject, actually. And so to kick off, I'm going to take you back in time. It was 1988. I was 17 years of age. My brother was off to Oxford University, and my mum and dad felt that I should have the same opportunity to follow in his footsteps, if you like. They wanted to give both their children the same opportunity in life, but it wasn't something I wanted. My brother was a straight A student, and I most definitely was not by a long shot. I didn't want to take the exam. I didn't study for it. I told them that I did, but I didn't. And the day of the exam arrived, and I remember turning over my paper, and I read a question that I was completely ill prepared for. It said, "Is a dream a lie if it don't come true? Or is it something worse? Discuss." Now, my delight at seeing a line from my favourite song, The River, by my favourite artist, Springsteen, passed ever so quickly when I realised I had absolutely no idea what to write. Nothing. Nada. I was caught off guard and completely unprepared, and I wrote about 2 lines. Fast forward an hour, the adjudicator comes around, he picks up my paper, and he actually sniggers. Now, in that moment, I felt an enormous amount of ridicule and shame. Thankfully, my regard for Springsteen wasn't dented that day, but my regard for myself was dented immeasurably. I have carried this belief around with me for about 30 years. Hugely uncomfortable. It defined my behaviors in every aspect of my life, because that's what beliefs do, right? Your beliefs drive your thoughts, and your thoughts drive your actions. So our often subconscious beliefs drive the conscious narrative in our heads, and we behave accordingly. So my belief logged that day in my subconscious that I'm not smart enough created a very, very active thought narrative about my inadequacy my whole life. And my actions, I suppose, off the back of this have been fueled by incredibly unhealthy perfectionist traits. Never again did I want to feel the shame and stupidity that I felt in that classroom. At work, I've been compelled to over-prepare for meetings. I've often overcomplicated and endlessly polished. I've been unwilling to share work and thoughts until they've been perfected, fully rounded, and really impressive. I've often found my head in a book on a quest for learning, thinking that more education will translate into easy confidence and greater ability. And throughout other aspects of my life, this perfectionism saw me chasing unachievable high standards to the point of exhaustion, to be honest. When I became a mother in my late 30s, I felt totally out of control and totally out of my depth. Now, a lot of women do, but remember my limiting belief? This was just one more thing that I wasn't smart enough to do. I compared myself cruelly to women who seemed to be more natural mothers. I envied the more accomplished. And feeling like a failure, I wanted to retreat back into my world of work, to be honest. I felt adrift on maternity leave, out of control, which is a nightmare for a perfectionist, and I just hated it. And then, of course, I felt an enormous amount of shame for feeling all of these thoughts instead of appreciating this moment in my life with my children. Emotional pain that ran so deep. As humans, we find quick fixes to make those bad feelings go away. Many of us feel uncomfortable sitting in our emotions, and some of us, like me, fell for belief that we should be happy all the time. So I engaged in behaviors that numb. Alcohol is an incredibly common quick fix. due to its accessibility and acceptability. Work is another place we can bury ourselves gambling, over or under eating, social media gaming. All of these things we believe in to be the answer because in the short term, they work. They do make the discomfort go away, but they are addictive and they simultaneously suppress these unwelcome emotions but deliver a burst of pleasure and escape. And we run from the pain and we run towards pleasure. And the result is addiction and dependency. I'm Anna Donaghey. I used to drink a bottle of wine a night, at least. More at the weekends. I drank secretively and I drank alone. I languished for many, many years in a dark pit of failed moderation, self-recrimination, and loathing. Remarkably, during that time, I rose to be the strategy director of a creative agency. Nobody knew, apart from me, just how low I had sunk emotionally and how physically exhausting it was to continue with my lives and present a successful face to the world. But I turned it all around and I used the method and the approach that I'm now accredited and certified to coach and share. In my practice as the beliefs coach, I specialize in alcohol mindset coaching, and I'm on a mission to crack the stigma attached to alcohol because it is the elephant in the well-being room. I want to open up the conversation that too few people are having, and I want to empower people with the knowledge to make better decisions around alcohol and make sure that they feel supported if they get themselves into the kind of trouble that I got myself into. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, why is this relevant to you? I'm going to explain, okay? I'm going to do 3 things in the next 15 minutes or so. I'm going to explain why this is relevant to you. I'm going to explain why your mental health agenda is incomplete without discussing alcohol. And I'm going to show you how you can empower and better support your people. All right. So why is this relevant to you? Let's start there. I believe that the workplace is where this conversation can and must start. I believe it's where we can prevent problems for our people, which means preventing problems for our businesses, right? Enlightened businesses are now investing so much time and money on wellness, but research from Deloitte's highlights that the cost to employers of poor mental health continues to increase and currently sits at about £56 billion per year. We're supporting our people to breathe better, sleep better, eat better, and move more, to get out and get at one with nature, to be more confident, more resilient, understand the menopause, and to understand remote working best practices. Yet no one, practically no one, is talking about how alcohol undermines the efficacy of all of these things. And no one is drawing the link between alcohol, stress, anxiety, burnout, and depression. Worse than that, in the vast majority of UK businesses, alcohol is only ever talked about in the context of disciplinary action, which clearly presents an enormous barrier to people coming forward to ask for help. It's so unusual for a business to take a proactive educational stance on alcohol, but when one does, as my agency has, garners recognition and helps win awards, it's bonkers that it's that unusual. It's relevant to you because everyone has uncomfortable and limiting beliefs. Remember, mine was I'm not smart enough, which led a negative narrative around inadequacy, which fueled a chase for high achievement, which fueled a sense of failure when I failed to get there. But we all have beliefs of that type, subconsciously, everyone. And we all have beliefs about how alcohol is also central to our society, like believing that it helps us fit into our social groups, our workplace cultures. We have beliefs around society in that way. And we have beliefs in alcohol itself, that it can help us feel less of the negative feelings and feel more of the positive ones. We effectively give it jobs to do. It's easy to look at this list, and most people can nod along and say, oh, actually, I do believe that. I believed that alcohol helped me relax. I believed that it made me happy. I believed that it made me more confident. I actually believed it made me more creative, which in my line of work was, I thought, an absolute precursor, absolutely needed. With as much conviction as I believe that the sky is blue, these were immutable truths and facts to me. In the end, I was giving alcohol so much to do on a daily basis, so many jobs, that I drank heavily on a daily basis, becoming very, very stuck and very, very addicted. It is relevant to you because this is not what alcohol addiction and alcohol dependency necessarily looks like. This is what it can look like. People in any business, people in your business, people who are just trying to navigate life and feel good, right? Not stereotypical alcoholics, but people who often describe their relationship with alcohol as just a bit uncomfortable, who may not always drink heavily, but have to have a wee drink every night. People who don't know how to navigate a world where it is absolutely everywhere. And people who don't know that the way alcohol is working and the way that it can create difficulties down the line. 1 in 5 UK adults exceed drinking guidelines daily. That is potentially 20% of your business, which means that investments that you're making in health and wellness for your employees designed to promote good mental health, like stress management, etc., are potentially being undermined daily. With alcohol responsible still for 17 million sick days in the UK, along with a host of other profit-draining costs to the business, from high freelance costs to reduced productivity, reduced engagement, having people coasting through their jobs, going off on long-term sickness, and potentially, inevitably, leaving the business too. But you may still be asking about, why is this on the mental health agenda? Why are you suggesting that the mental health agenda is incomplete unless we talk about it? Why is alcohol that missing piece? Well, let me explain, okay? The relationship between alcohol and mental health, it's complex, but it is undeniable. About 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience mental health problems this year, and it is incredibly common for alcohol to be used to try and help manage the symptoms, to self-medicate. For this reason, the Medical Council in the UK describe alcohol as the nation's favourite coping mechanism. We manage stress with it, we manage anxiety with it, we manage depression with it, and all manner of other mental health problems. And it is beyond question that drinking makes these symptoms worse. I'm not going to get too sciencey on you, but I am going to get sciencey on you for a minute, because it's really, really important that we understand why alcohol needs to be talked about in terms of mental well-being. There is absolutely no doubt, I'm not going to sit here and suggest for one moment that alcohol doesn't make us feel better initially, and it gives us a brief feeling of euphoria. And it is that artificial stimulation, that stimulation of the brain's pleasure zone, that is exactly what makes alcohol addictive. But it is artificial, and that's the point. It is chemical, and it is at unnaturally high levels, okay? Things like reading a good book, having a lovely meal, having a night of rumpy-pumpy after a great movie, all of these things are natural ways of stimulating the pleasure circuit. Alcohol is unnatural. And when our brain senses the presence of that unnaturally high level of dopamine in our system, it produces a chemical called dynorphin that turns that stimulation way down. This is our body's really clever way of keeping things in balance, okay? So the dopamine sends us high and the dynorphin brings us down. So as soon as the alcohol leaves our system, our mood plunges further than it ever was before. Regular drinking means that over time, because you're constantly releasing dynorphin, you've constantly got it in your body, and it doesn't discriminate. Doesn't discriminate what type of pleasure it suppresses. It suppresses all pleasure, which means that everyday activities that used to bring us pleasure are no longer felt. Even joyful things like children's parties now feel better with a glass of wine in hand. We come to believe that it's the only thing that makes us happy, and eventually this becomes true. And even alcohol can't pull you out of these lows as you sink lower and lower because of the constant presence of dynorphin in your body. Now, if someone suffers from depression for other good reasons, this is a disaster. And the likelihood of the support we can offer as businesses helping in those instances is completely undermined. Last bit of science. Talked about how it links to depression. What about stress and anxiety, the other common mental health issue which we're constantly dealing with in the workplace? Well, let me explain alcohol's links to that. The crazy thing is that alcohol isn't just a depressant. It is a stimulant, okay? When you have a drink, I'll try and explain this really simply, but when you have a drink, the level of alcohol in your blood or your blood alcohol content starts to rise as soon as you have that drink. And that is the association, that feeling of energetic euphoria. And for one drink, your BAC will rise for about 20 to 30 minutes. And that's why we think drinking makes us feel good. What we don't realize, though, is that just after 20 to 30 minutes, our BAC begins to fall as alcohol is purged from our body. And that falling BAC creates all sorts of unpleasant emotions like tiredness and sadness and anxiety and stress. But it gets worse. Striving again for balance, our clever body this time releases stimulants, cortisol namely, and adrenaline, stress hormones. So as your BAC starts to fall, your stress levels begin to rise, which means you're now feeling more stressed than you ever did before you had a drink. What are you going to crave? A drink, because we believe it helps counter stress. Now remember, your BAC rises for about 20 to 30 minutes. Well, that same single drink creates a falling BAC or causes our BAC to fall for 2 to 3 hours, right? So we are trading minutes of enjoyment for hours of uneasiness and stress. We're not aware of this when we drink for the entire evening because the unpleasantness of all of that occurs when we're asleep. If we're lucky enough to sleep through the worst of it, then we just feel hungover and anxious the next morning. But if we're less fortunate, we can relate to that 3 o'clock, wide awake, mind racing episode, the episodes that completely kibosh sleep. Okay? So for these reasons, regular drinking brings constantly elevated levels of stress hormones and an emotional roller coaster of BAC peaks and troughs. This makes it well nigh impossible to manage mood, and it also completely undermines the efficacy of stress medication. So you can see, hopefully, how depression, anxiety, and stress and burnout, which are the things that really, really trouble us within the wellness agendas at work, can be caused and exacerbated by alcohol. Sleep patterns completely kiboshed, energy levels therefore impacted, motivation drastically reduced, relationships damaged by moods and withdrawal, a fogginess that constantly prevails, and perhaps, the most psychologically damaging of all, the low self-esteem from failed moderation, the broken commitments, and the loss of confidence that comes from feeling out of control and a complete failure. Now revert just for one moment to why I say this is relevant to you. No business can productively and optimally operate with between 20 to 25% of its staff potentially suffering from poor sleep, low energy, loss of motivation, low ambition, poor self-esteem, and low confidence. But these are the statistics. and the reality of what's going on in workplaces up and down the country, and possibly yours. So what can we do about it? What can we do about this? How can we better empower and better support people? We can do it by being different. We can do it by starting this conversation and being proactive about having the conversation. You don't have to treat alcohol any differently to any other element of the wellness agenda, but you do need to put it onto the wellness agenda. You don't have to preach. You don't have to enforce. You simply have to help people help themselves, give people the information off which they can make better choices. And by the way, slightly veering off, it's also worth mentioning that there is a very large, growing, sober, curious movement in the UK. There are a lot of people, particularly in Gen Z, who are making active choices to set out and drink less. So there is an opportunity here to be really attuned to them and be supportive of those choices in the workplace. You can normalize it by simply opening the conversation and creating awareness of the issues. This is a standard kind of spectrum, if you like, normalizing it by simply opening up the conversation, create awareness of the issues, shine a light. You can empower your people with the right mindset and tools, and you can support those who put their hand up in need. And that's where I come in. This is where I can help you, how I can help your organization, and I can therefore help you help your people. I can open up a deeply personal conversation that highlights the issues. I can talk to your teams like I'm talking to you today and share my insights, break some of those common misbeliefs, share some science, highlight the warning signs, bring some tips to the table, and leave people with tactics. I can educate. I can take the most common reasons why we drink, demonstrating as I have done today with stress and depression, why alcohol is not the answer. So I do talks, if you like, a series of talks looking at the links between alcohol and stress, alcohol and depression, alcohol and sleep, between alcohol and social life, how to navigate that world where it's everywhere, how to belong when you don't have a drink in your hand, and also the drinks between alcohol, loneliness, and boredom, because these are 3 things that are entirely linked again. So I can explain in these situations why alcohol is not the answer, but I can empower people with the tools that are the answer. And then finally, as an accredited alcohol mindset coach, I can work in depth with any individual to make alcohol small and irrelevant. My lived experience, my compassion, and empowering approach to coaching presents a completely different and very stark alternative, if you like, to the options that are sometimes more stigmatized by AA, or the less personal options like healthcare, insurance, helplines, etc. Anyway, my coaching tends to be a sort of a 3-month program, and we really dig in to make alcohol small and irrelevant. And the whole point behind this is empowerment and the ability to sort of go forth and work, socialize, and live in a world where alcohol promises to remain for quite some time. So look, there are 3 ways here in which I could help you, and it would be wonderful to help your people, by slotting this missing piece into the jigsaw, by starting the conversation that will benefit your team and benefit your business in a multitude of different ways. So thank you, thank you for your time. I hope that it's been useful, and that we have the opportunity to talk more about how I can support you. And for that reason, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Here are my details. I'd love to hear from you.